back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. The topic for today is Record Store Day, Black Friday 2025. So what we're going to do, as I do really every year, or actually these days twice a year, is I'm going to run down all the jazz titles that are in the list so that you don't need to worry about going to Record Store Day and trying to figure out what's what. Not only am I going to run down each of the titles at the very end, I'm going to tell you which ones I'm most excited about, as well as the ones that I think are probably going to be the most difficult to get. So before we dive in, just hit subscribe if you like this kind of content. Helps me out. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram as well. I'm at what_can_brown. All right, so some people have expressed a little bit of disappointment with this list. I'm the sort of person, if there's like a handful of titles that I'm excited about, then I'm excited about Record Store Day. And I did find that amongst this list. So without further ado, first one I want to talk about is Albert Ayler and Don Cherry. So this is a 4 LP box set that's being put out by ORG Music. And the music is actually comprised of 4 different sets of recordings, all from 1964. This is a RSD first release. So what that implies is that it's actually going to be available not just on the day, but after the day as well. So keep that in mind. But the Record Store Day quantity is just 1,250 copies. So it's pretty limited. And it's probably going to retail for around $125. I say probably and around because I think that there's like suggested prices, but stores have the ability to kind of price it wherever. So again, around $125. As far as each of these sets, not only do you have Albert Ayler and Don Cherry, but they're joined by Gary Peacock on bass and Sonny Murray on drums across each of the sets. This is the first time that this music is on vinyl, but it is actually on Bandcamp currently, not the vinyl, but at least some of the digital tracks. So you can go over there and actually preview it if you'd like. How I'd classify this music is definitely free jazz. You will get several versions of each of the tracks because they kind of had a repertoire that it seems like they continued to perform. Obviously, with free jazz, it doesn't mean that the tracks are going to be completely the same, but what I would say about this one, about this box set, is that as much as I like the idea of more Ayler and Don Cherry being put out, it's just a little bit too out there for me, and so it's probably going to be a pass. All right, second one up is by Ray Barretto, and this is titled Together. This is being put out by Craft Recordings. So there's always a lot of anticipation around Craft every Record Store Day. So far, at least in recent years, they've been putting out like a mono edition of a jazz, prestige or new jazz title, something like that. They didn't decide to do that. So what we have is Ray Barretto's Together, which is originally put out on Fania Records in 1969. It's being put out in a quantity of 1,800. This is a title that's limited to Record Store Days, so don't expect it to be available for sale after. Probably going to retail around $30. What I would say about this title is that some of the tracks are definitely more sort of jazz or maybe funk forward. Elsewhere, it's a little bit more traditional salsa, Afro-Cuban in sound, definitely has vocals throughout. So for me, this doesn't quite scratch the itch of like a 1950s mono jazz recording that Kraft could have put out, but obviously, I'm sure that it's going to appeal to a certain audience. All right, next one is Larry Coryell and the 11th House. This is titled Riviera 1976. It's being put out by Culture Factory USA in a quantity of 2,000. This is limited to Record Store Day. The music was recorded in July of 1976. And for me, this is, well, not just for me, this is very much fusion, right? Like, people know Larry Coryell for a certain style of music. Personally, I've never been a fan of Larry Coryell's music, and I don't, amongst the 3,000 plus albums in this room, I don't own any of his music. But I know that fusion is kind of back, and so there's a lot of energy around it. As far as the other details on this release, it's clear vinyl. I do believe this is the first time the music has ever been released in physical form, so implying that I guess it's been available digitally. And it's going to be the retail price is going to be somewhere around $35. So not exactly a strong start to this list, at least in terms of the stuff that appeals to me. But don't worry, we're getting to the good stuff. Miles Davis is up next. So Miles Davis is obviously going to capture a lot of people's attention, always does at Record Store Day. So what is this release? Well, it's the Live at the Plugged Nickel, December 23rd, 1965. So what this is recordings across 2 LPs that is basically a subset of the entire Plug Nickel sessions. I'm going to talk about that again in just a second here. But it's being put out in a quantity of 5,900. So this is going to be relatively available. And this release is limited to Record Store Day. However, what this release is it's kind of getting ahead of a more robust box set that's coming in January, which is going to be the complete Plug Nickel sets. As far as the lineup on this, it's that era of Miles Davis where it's like, I mean, it's 1965, right? So it's Miles Davis, Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Tony Williams, an absolutely classic quintet that he has here. And this music has been released before, but the vinyl version has actually gotten quite expensive. So what we have for Record Store Day is like a 2 LP set, but it's ahead of a much more robust box set. So I think the math that you have to do is, do you want to spend the, call it $45, maybe $50 for this double LP set for Record Store Day, or do you want to wait until January and spend north of 200? I think it was like 215, 220 on Target. That I saw for the full box. So I think that there are going to be a bunch of people, especially jazz heads, that are going to want to wait and get the full box. But I think for folks who don't, say focus exclusively on jazz, maybe just the 2 LP will indeed be enough. All right, we can't possibly have Record Store Day without Bill Evans. So this next one is Bill Evans' Portraits at the Penthouse live in Seattle. It's being put out by Resonance Records, who often puts out the Bill Evans content. It's in a quantity of 4,000, so it is going to be relatively available, and this is limited to Record Store Day. The lineup in terms of, it's always a trio with Bill, right? So it's Eddie Gomez and Joe Hunt. This content was originally recorded for radio broadcast. It's been transferred from those original tapes by Matthew Luthans, who basically handles, as far as I can tell, every single release for Resonance Records these days, oftentimes for Elemental as well. This one does include a booklet, as Resonance Records typically likes to do, and it's from the 1966 time period. I think that that's actually a little bit important to point out, because it feels to me like a lot of the Bill Evans material that we've gotten for Record Store Day has been in his shaggy hair days. This is definitely a little bit earlier, right? 1966. So I think it's all about audio quality, right? But I think that this is an era for Bill Evans that's going to give more people energy than normal. This is, I believe, a single LP, and the price is around $30. All right, I know everybody's been screaming for another copy of Charlie Brown Christmas on vinyl. So we have Vince Guaraldi Trio, A Charlie Brown Christmas. This is the 60th anniversary edition. Rather than doing a different color for the vinyl, because it's going to be on black vinyl, it's actually a pop-up gatefold LP. Craft Recordings is behind this one. They're putting it out in a quantity of 4,000, and this is limited to Record Store Day. So, you can complain all you want that we don't need another version, but I think the bottom line is that every year they can continue to release a new version, and there's going to be people who are going to want it because it's just that popular of an item, not just specifically the Record Store Day edition, but the idea of the album. So this is one of the ways to get it. You can get last year's edition. You can get any of these various editions, but they are putting out one on Record Store Day, and it's gonna sell out. Like it just does. It's that popular of music, right? I'm actually unsure on the price exactly for this one, based on the fact that it's Craft Recordings, and based on what I know about some of their other stuff, it's probably going to be around $30, $32, something like that. But again, I think the difference with this one is the pop-up gatefold sleeve. I have prior year's editions. I'm probably not going to go after this, but again, it'll sell out. So this next one was kind of interesting to me. This is Charlie Haden live at the Jazz Record Mart. This is being put out by Delmark Records, which would make a lot of sense because the owner of Delmark and the owner of Jazz Record Mart were one and the same anyway. It's being put out in a quantity of just 1,000, so pretty limited. You may go to a store that doesn't have any copies of it. Fortunately for you, though, this is being called a RSD first, meaning later there's going to be a wider release. So yes, this will be your first opportunity to get it, but if you don't, there'll be another opportunity to get it after the fact. As far as the lineup on this, well, it's just Charlie Haden, so this is a solo bass record. Very interesting. Supposedly this music has not been otherwise released elsewhere. And I believe the price point on this one is going to be $30. Next up is by Jazz Sabbath, and this is live at Black Lake. It's a double LP release. It's being put out in a quantity of 2,750. This actually is also an RSD first, meaning we can expect it to be widely available after the fact. So if you don't know Jazz Sabbath, this is Adam Wakeman's project of Black Sabbath fame, so Black Sabbath, Jazz Sabbath. It's a live album. It was actually recorded earlier this year in 2025 while on tour. Let's see, I mentioned double album. Oh, it's going to be on translucent orange vinyl. So I thought that was interesting. Personally, I've never heard Jazz Sabbath. I barely knew that they existed, but the fact that that this is sort of being put out, it made me realize, maybe I should check them out. So I think I'm going to preview before I just go out and try to grab this one. Believe the price point for this one is somewhere around $40. All right, so the first of two Rahsaan Roland Kirk releases for Record Store Day. This is pretty exciting. So the first one is titled Seek and Listen, live at the Penthouse. This is being put out by Resonance Records in a double LP format in a quantity of just 1,200. So this is pretty limited. In fact, the other one is just 1,200 as well. I mentioned double LP, Resonance. Let's see, the content, it's live. It's a live performance. And Roland Kirk is playing with Ron Burton, Jimmy Hops, and Steve Novosel here. This was originally recorded for radio, and it's at a price point of $50. So based on some of the other, I'll call it similar content, including from the Penthouse recordings that Resonance has put out in recent years, gives me actually pretty good confidence that this is going to sound really good, because I was impressed, I think, last year when they put out some of the content from the Penthouse. So it seemed like they had the ability to record really well, and if they knew that they were going to be doing it for broadcast radio, they did a good job as well. So we'll see, but this is definitely going to be one that I'm interested in. Might as well talk about the other Roland Kirk. So this is Vibrations in the Village, live at the Village Gate. Also by Resonance, also a double LP, also a quantity of 1,200. This one also is going to be priced at about $50. So another live recording. This one's from 1963. Excuse me. They actually recorded this for an unreleased documentary, so I don't believe that this music has otherwise been available, or if it has, it certainly hasn't been on vinyl. The lineup here includes three different pianists. So you have Horace Parlan, Mel Ryan, and Jane Getz. You also have Henry Grimes and Sonny Brown. I think that this sounds really exciting. I mean, 1963, Rahsaan Roland Kirk, Village Gate, great lineup. Like it feels like there could be some interesting energy on this one. Definitely, again, one that I'm going to be interested in checking out. All right, next up is Resonance Records' sort of sister label by Zev Feldman. This is Elemental Records' release of Yusef Lateef's Golden Flower. This is also a double LP. It's in a quantity of 1,750, and this is a RSD first, so it will be available after the fact as well. The material here was recorded in 1967, and it includes a variety of musicians, including several Swedish musicians who I can't pronounce their names, but we do have Tootie Heath on this. There is a lineup as well with a more familiar musicians, including Kenny Barron, Bob Cunningham, and again Tootie Heath on that lineup. So, for me, this is a little bit of a follow-up to the Avignon release, which I think came out last year, or was it earlier this year for Record Store Day? But either way, that was a really nice recording. I remember talking about it on YouTube and just being very surprised at how great it sounded. So again, this does feel like a follow-up to that. Hopefully it's just as good, if not better. And this one is at a price point of $50. All right, we're getting towards the bottom of the list. This next one is going to be very exciting to a lot of folks, I think. This is by Bill Lee, and it is titled The Descendants of Mike and Phoebe, A Spirit Speaks. And this is the deluxe edition. So this is a Strata East recording, or Strata East Records release. It's being put out in a quantity of 1,500. However, this is what's being called an RSD first as well, which means it's going to be available after the fact. So if you remember last Record Store Day, there was the Pharoah Sanders that I think we all thought was going to be exclusive to Record Store Day, and then they decided to go wide with it. This time, I think they know what the demand is going to be, so they're doing it for Record Store Day, but then following it up with a more robust release. So certainly know that. Don't feel like you have to overpay for this one. So what to say about this? Well, it's being mastered by Kevin Gray from the original tapes. I think this is Kevin Gray's only participation on the jazz list for Black Friday this year. And I think the price point is going to be just the same as the other titles that Strata East is tackling as part of their reissue series. Incidentally, they also just announced 4 more titles for their standard release schedule. So there's a lot that Mac Avenue and Strata East, that kind of partnership, there's a lot that they're doing together, and I think it's all good stuff. So this is going to be one that I'm definitely excited about. All right, the next one is a very rare record in its original form, sold for as much as $1,000. This is Longineu Parsons, and I guess self-titled release. This is being put out by Ubiquity Records in a quantity of just 1,500. This is an RSD exclusive, so this is the only place you're going to be able to get it. Like I said, this album is rare in its original form. I think it was originally recorded in 1980. I believe that the artist is actually the one who's remixed it from the original tapes. Incidentally, he plays a mixture of trumpet and sort of a variety of recorders. Music here is what I would call, more sort of spiritual in sound, and I think that that's what has sort of drawn a lot of interest to this particular album over the years. And it otherwise just hasn't been available in a reissue form. So I think this is really exciting. The price point is right. It's just $32. I don't think that this is going to be one that people outside of the jazz space are necessarily going to dial into because they're not going to be aware of who this artist is. However, for those of us in the jazz space that are a little bit closer to some of these rare records, this is going to be one that's like highly sought after, at least by me. So, so I'm excited, and hopefully my local shop has one in stock. Every record store day, we can count on a compilation by Jazz Dispensary. This one is titled, let's see, Green Bullets. So Craft Recordings, which is the parent label, right, for Jazz Dispensary, is putting this out. It's in a quantity of 4,100. So it's going to be relatively available. This is an RSD exclusive, as all the compilations are. I've actually been impressed in recent years with some of the compilations. I think it's well-curated music. Oftentimes, I don't have all of that music otherwise on individual albums. And so, it has actually introduced me to new music, which is, I don't know, it's just continually surprising because I feel like I'm pretty well studied in the space, and yet they managed to dig out all this like kind of like soul and funk adjacent stuff and kit it together, and I get to hear some music I've never heard. There is some Dizzy Gillespie here. There's some Isaac Hayes. There's some Blackbirds. There's some Catalyst. A lot of great artists. It's being put out on what they're calling Green Thunder vinyl. I think they always go with some sort of splatter, or sort of a different style, different color of vinyl. And I think the price point in this is actually pretty good. It's like $28. All right, the last one is by Lester Young, and it's called Lester Leaps In, live at Birdland, 1951 to 1952. The label is named Liberation Hall. They're putting it out in a quantity of just 1,500, and this is an RSD first, so it will be available after as well. So I believe that the material, they're calling it unreleased. I kind of find that hard to believe that this music has never been released in any form before. Perhaps this is the first time that they're kitting it together. I'm not entirely sure. Just, are we really discovering new Lester Young music now? Maybe, maybe not. But what else about it? Well, it's being put out on 100-gram vinyl. Obviously, these are early recordings, so I'm sure that they are going to sound early. But at the same time, for folks who are fans of the kind of swing to early bop kind of era, this is probably pretty exciting, especially if it is music that you've never heard before. I believe that the price point in this is surprisingly low. I think I saw it on a website, something like $27, $28. So we'll kind of see what happens, I guess, on the day. But this was it's seldom that we get like a true archive release that's brought forward for RSD. So this is an interesting addition, I think, to the list this year. All right, so final thoughts. What am I most excited about? What do I think is going to sell out? So the ones that I'm going to go after, I probably kind of prompted this as I was talking through it, but I think the Bill Evans Portraits at the Penthouse is an interesting one, and I'm going to try to go after that. I think both Roland Kirk's, I think the Yusef Lateef Golden Flower is another one that's interesting to me. The Bill Lee Strata East Descendants of Mike and Phoebe release is something that I think it's I mean, if you asked me 10 years ago if I ever thought that title would be part of Record Store Day, I would have told you were crazy. So that's an interesting one. But again, that's one that I can wait until after. So even if I don't find it in store, I'll still be able to get it after the fact. So no rush exactly on that one. But I think the big one, the Longineu Parsons, that's just one that I think would be really cool to have. It's going to be limited. It's going to be hard to get. Not every store is even going to have a copy, right? So I think that that's got to be one that's that I'm going to be interested in. So again, it's Longineu Parsons, it's the Strata East, it's Yusef Lateef, both Roland Kirks, and Bill Evans. Those are the ones. I'm going to wait for Miles Davis. I'm going to wait until January and decide if I want to get that full box set. I don't know if I need that much of his live content, and yet at the same time, I just know there's a lot of energy around this particular sort of series of releases at the Plugged Nickel. So maybe there's something to them, and I need to maybe I need to preview some more tracks. So those are going to be the ones that I'm most excited about. As far as what I think are going to be the absolute hardest ones to get, the ones that are going to sell out, you're not going to be able to find, I think the Bill Evans is going to be grabbed pretty quickly by a lot of folks. Keep in mind that even though Resonance is putting that out, they're putting it out in significantly greater quantity than either of the others, right? So not 1,200 copies, they're putting it out in 4,000 copies, and yet Bill Evans has this universal appeal. People are always trying to grab them. There's people who collect every single Bill Evans Resonance release. So those people are going to be out there, which is one of the reasons why I think this one is going to be more difficult to find. More stores are going to get it, but it's going to be the one that's going to disappear off the shelf, possibly before the Roland Kirks, before the Yusef Lateef, that kind of thing, right? The other one that I think is going to be the hardest to get, and I was thinking about, is going back and forth, because I mentioned that the Longineu Parsons he's not a familiar name, and yet not every store is going to get one because it's only 1,500. So I do think that that's going to be one of the more difficult ones to get. I think all of the jazz heads are going to be after it, and you're not going to be able to get it after the fact, right? So it's limited to Record Store Day, which is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit less concerned about the Strata East one that is not limited to Record Store Day. And that's kind of been an interesting element with this list, is that so many of these are more than usual are RSD firsts and not RSD exclusives, right? So that was kind of an interesting thing that they did this year that I think is probably going to please more folks. You don't have to feel the need to stand in line right the night before necessarily to get some of the titles that you want. So I think, again, I think those two are going to be the ones that are going to be the hardest to find on the day, that are going to be the, perhaps the most in demand as well. So that's kind of my thoughts. Overall, I think, like I led with, is there enough on this list that I'm excited about? Yes. Do I think that there's been better lists overall in years past? Absolutely. I was especially disappointed with Craft's sort of lack of a call it a flagship release. But this isn't doom and gloom. I don't think it spells the end of Record Store Day. I think there's plenty on this list that's exciting for a lot of us. So let me know what you think about the list, I guess, in the comments, and I hope this was helpful. So yeah, I suppose that's it. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time.